Let me ask you something uncomfortable. Have you ever noticed how some people walk into a room and nothing happens? No one looks up, no one shifts in their seat. The air stays exactly the same, and then someone else enters. Not louder, not more aggressive, not trying to impress anyone, yet suddenly the room changes. People glance at them. Conversations pause for half a second. There's a subtle awareness in the air, as if everyone's nervous system quietly registered something important. What causes that difference? It isn't money, it isn't physical size, and strangely enough, it isn't even confidence in the way most people think. Because the truth is brutal, most people don't lack confidence, they leak authority, they apologize for existing, they rush their words, they laugh too quickly, they give away attention like loose coins falling from their pockets. And the world notices, not consciously, but instinctively. Human beings evolved to detect signals of strength and weakness long before language existed, long before civilization, long before social media turned validation into a currency, which means every room you walk into becomes a silent psychological negotiation. And most people lose it within the first 5 seconds. Today, we are going to dismantle the hidden behaviors that quietly drain your personal power. Not with surface-level advice, but with principles drawn from psychology, behavioral science, and centuries of leadership strategy. By the end of this video, you will understand something most people never realize. Respect is rarely given to the loudest person in the room. It is given to the person who needs it the least, and once you understand why, your entire presence begins to change. Before we talk about power, we need to expose a silent agreement most people unknowingly sign. It happens early in life. A child smiles politely when relatives visit. A student raises their hand for approval from a teacher. A teenager learns that fitting in brings safety. Gradually, without realizing it, the brain begins forming a rule. If people like me, I am safe. This rule becomes an operating system, and it follows you into adulthood. You soften your opinions during meetings. You laugh when your boss makes a weak joke. You stay quiet when someone crosses a boundary, not because you agree, but because something inside you whispers, "Don't disrupt the harmony." The problem is that social harmony and personal authority often move in opposite directions. Psychologist Albert Bandura introduced the concept of self-efficacy, the belief that you can influence outcomes in your life. People with high self-efficacy behave differently in subtle but powerful ways. They pause before speaking. They disagree without panic. They allow silence to exist, not because they are rude, but because they do not rely on constant reassurance from others. Now imagine 2 employees in a meeting. The first speaks quickly, filling every gap in conversation. The second listens quietly, speaking only when necessary. Which one feels more authoritative? It's almost always the second. Why? Because humans instinctively associate scarcity with value. Economist thinking explains this clearly. When something is abundant, it becomes less valuable. The same applies to attention and words. If you offer them constantly, they lose weight. This is why many highly respected leaders develop the habit of intentional restraint. Consider Angela Merkel, former Chancellor of Germany. She rarely dominated conversations. She didn't rely on theatrical speeches. Yet inside political circles she was known as one of the most formidable negotiators in Europe. Her strength came from patience and timing. She spoke less, but when she did, everyone listened. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself something honestly. During conversations, are you trying to express your thoughts, or are you trying to manage other people's perception of you? Those two goals produce very different behaviors. One creates clarity, the other creates anxiety, and anxiety leaks power. Thought experiment. Imagine walking into a room where nobody knows you. You have two options. Option A: spend the next hour subtly trying to impress everyone. Option B: simply observe, speak when necessary, and remain comfortable in silence. Which version of you appears more secure? Which version seems more self-possessed? The answer reveals something important. Authority is not created through effort. It is created through freedom from the need to impress. Micro-challenge for the next 24 hours. Experiment with one simple rule. Do not rush your responses. When someone asks you a question, pause, just 2 seconds, long enough for your mind to settle. You will immediately notice something fascinating. People begin listening more carefully because the moment you stop chasing approval, others start paying attention. But this is only the beginning, because approval seeking doesn't just appear in words. It appears in your body. And the next shift happens in a place most people never think about: your posture. Look around any public place, an airport, a cafe, a busy office floor. Within seconds, your brain will begin sorting people into invisible categories: leaders, followers, confident, uncertain. What's interesting is that this classification happens before anyone speaks. Why? Because the human brain processes body language thousands of times faster than verbal information. Social psychologist Amy Cuddy famously explored this phenomenon in her research on power posture. Her studies demonstrated that the way we hold our bodies not only changes how others perceive us, it changes how we perceive ourselves. When people adopt expansive postures, their stress hormone cortisol decreases and confidence-related hormones increase. In simple terms, your body can influence your psychology, but this effect goes deeper than posture alone. It influences spatial behavior. Watch how confident individuals move through crowded environments. They don't rush. They don't zigzag nervously. Their movement follows a clear vector. Imagine two people walking down a hallway. Person 1 constantly adjusts direction, avoiding eye contact and apologizing when paths cross. Person 2 walks steadily, looking toward their destination. Who moves aside? Almost always the first person, not because they are weaker, but because uncertainty creates hesitation. And hesitation invites dominance from others. This isn't aggression, it's momentum. Even animals follow this rule. In nature, predators move with calm focus. Prey animals scan constantly, adjusting direction with sudden bursts of nervous energy. Humans, despite all our technology and language, still respond to these signals subconsciously, which leads to a fascinating realization. Many social hierarchies are established without a single word spoken. Exercise, the grounding reset. Try this simple posture adjustment right now. Stand up. Place both feet firmly on the ground. Relax your shoulders. Lift your head slightly. Then take one slow breath. Notice what happens. Your chest opens. Your voice becomes steadier. Your mind becomes calmer. This is not mystical. It is neurological feedback. The brain constantly reads signals from the body to determine emotional state, which means by adjusting physical posture, you can interrupt cycles of anxiety and hesitation. The eye contact principle. There is another powerful signal people often misuse: eye contact. Many people believe confidence means staring intensely at others. But true presence is subtler. Instead of staring, confident individuals practice steady attention. They look at someone while speaking, then briefly look away, then return naturally. This rhythm communicates something important. I am engaged, but I am not seeking your approval. Compare this to nervous eye behavior, rapid scanning, downward glances, or forced staring. Those patterns reveal internal uncertainty. Presence, on the other hand, feels grounded, stable, unhurried, and when combined with controlled speech patterns, it produces something rare: psychological gravity. People begin orienting toward you automatically, not because you demanded attention, but because your behavior signals self-containment. And humans are drawn to individuals who appear internally anchored. But posture alone does not create influence, because presence becomes truly powerful only when paired with something even rarer in modern society: silence. And the next section will show you why the quietest person in the room often holds the most psychological leverage. The strategic power of silence. Modern life has trained people to fear quiet moments. Think about it. You stand in an elevator with strangers. Someone immediately checks their phone. Two people pause in conversation. Someone rushes to fill the gap with a random comment. Silence, for most people, feels uncomfortable, but that discomfort reveals something profound. Silence forces the brain to think, and thinking exposes uncertainty. This is why the person who can remain calm during silence automatically gains psychological leverage. Leadership researchers studying negotiation patterns found that individuals who pause before responding often gain subtle advantages in discussions. Why? Because silence creates cognitive pressure. When a conversation suddenly stops, the human brain begins searching for meaning. Did I say something wrong? Are they judging me? Should I clarify? In many cases, the other person will begin explaining themselves further, sometimes revealing information they never intended to share. The person who remains calm during silence gains time to observe, and observation is power. Historically, some of the most influential figures in diplomacy mastered this skill. For example, during Cold War negotiations, Soviet diplomat Andrei Gromyko became known for his long pauses during discussions. Western negotiators often described feeling pressured to continue speaking simply to break the silence. The interesting part, he rarely raised his voice, he rarely showed emotion, he simply waited. This technique allowed him to gather information while others filled the space with unnecessary words. Now imagine applying this principle in everyday life. You're in a meeting, someone proposes an idea. Instead of immediately responding, you pause, just long enough to think. That small moment accomplishes several things. First, it prevents impulsive reactions. Second, it communicates thoughtfulness. Third, it signals that your words carry weight, because when people speak constantly, their words blur together. But when someone speaks sparingly, each statement becomes more noticeable. The 2-second rule. Try practicing a simple discipline during conversations. When someone asks you a question, pause for 2 seconds, not dramatically, just long enough to gather your thoughts. At first, it may feel awkward, but soon you will notice something surprising. People begin listening more carefully. Because your responses feel deliberate rather than automatic, Silence and emotional control. Silence also serves another critical function. It prevents emotional escalation. Imagine someone criticizing you during a discussion. Most people react instantly. They defend themselves, they interrupt, they argue. But emotional reactions often reduce credibility. Instead, imagine responding differently. You hear the criticism. You pause, you look at the person calmly, then you respond slowly and clearly. That pause changes the entire dynamic. Instead of appearing defensive, you appear composed, and composure is often mistaken for authority. Reflection question. Think about your last difficult conversation. Did you rush to respond, or did you allow yourself a moment to think? That difference often determines whether a conversation escalates or resolves. Affirmation. My words gain strength when I allow silence to prepare them. Repeat that idea mentally. Because silence is not weakness, it is control. But silence alone is not enough. There is another hidden force that quietly shapes how people treat you every day. It's something many people unknowingly give away, freely, constantly, and once you understand it, you'll realize why some individuals seem impossible to influence. The answer lies in something modern society trades endlessly: validation. Breaking the addiction to validation, take a moment and imagine something unusual. Imagine posting a photo online and receiving 0 reactions, no likes, no comments, no feedback. How would that feel? For many people, the idea triggers immediate discomfort because modern technology has turned validation into a form of currency. Every notification becomes a tiny reward. Psychologists studying digital behavior have compared these reward systems to gambling machines. The anticipation of approval activates the brain's dopamine pathways, which means many people become subconsciously conditioned to seek external affirmation. But here is the problem. When your emotional state depends on other people's approval, you give them control over your confidence. Influence expert Robert Cialdini explains that humans naturally respond to social proof, the tendency to look at others when determining what is valuable or correct. This instinct is useful for cooperation, but it becomes dangerous when applied to personal identity. Because if your self-worth depends on others' opinions, your stability disappears. One compliment lifts your mood. One insult ruins your day. That is not confidence. That is dependency. Internal vs external authority, true self-assurance begins when identity shifts from external approval to internal evaluation. In simple terms, instead of asking, "Do they approve of me?" you begin asking, "Did I perform according to my standards?" This shift seems small, but psychologically it is massive, because it moves control from the outside world into your own mind. Athletes understand this concept deeply. Consider elite tennis champion Novak Djokovic. During intense matches, crowds often cheer for his opponents. If his performance depended on crowd approval, his concentration would collapse. Instead, he focuses entirely on internal metrics: breathing, footwork, strategy. The crowd becomes background noise. This mindset allows him to perform consistently regardless of external reactions. Thought experiment. Imagine 2 professionals presenting a project. Person A constantly watches the audience for approval signals. Person B focuses entirely on delivering their message clearly. Which one appears more confident? The second person. Because they are not negotiating for acceptance. They are communicating value. Practical exercise. approval detox for the next 48 hours. Try something unusual. Avoid seeking validation in small ways. Don't fish for compliments. Don't explain every decision. Don't check reactions immediately after sharing something online. Simply observe how often the urge appears. You may be surprised, because once you notice the pattern, you begin reclaiming control. Affirmation: my value is determined by my actions, not by applause. Hold on to that, because the moment you stop chasing approval, your behavior begins to change. You speak more directly. You make decisions faster. You stop negotiating your identity with strangers. And that shift leads to the next transformation, because once you stop seeking validation, you begin to notice something else. The way you occupy space, the psychology of space and scarcity. Imagine walking into a cafe and seeing two people seated separately. The first person looks restless. They check their phone repeatedly. They look around the room for attention. The second person sits quietly, reading, working, completely comfortable in their own space, which person appears more self-assured. Most people instinctively choose the second. Why? Because comfort in solitude signals internal stability. People who constantly seek interaction often appear uncertain, but individuals who are comfortable alone create an aura of independence. This principle also applies to time and attention. When someone is always available, their presence becomes predictable. Predictability reduces perceived value. This concept mirrors a basic economic principle. Scarcity increases perceived worth. When something is limited, people treat it more carefully. This applies to products, resources, and even attention. Behavioral economists studying decision making frequently reference work inspired by Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman, who explored how scarcity affects perception and judgment. When people believe access is limited, their focus intensifies. This is why invitations to exclusive events feel more appealing than open invitations. Scarcity signals importance. Social scarcity, this does not mean becoming distant or unfriendly. It means becoming intentional with your availability. For example, you don't need to respond instantly to every message. You don't need to attend every social gathering. You don't need to explain every absence. Instead, you choose where your energy goes. That choice alone communicates something powerful. Your time has value. The exit strategy here is a simple habit that reinforces this principle. When a conversation reaches a natural high point, leave. Not abruptly, just gracefully. Good talking with you. I need to get going. Most people stay until conversations become awkward or exhausted. But leaving while energy is still high creates a different effect. People remember the interaction positively, and they remain curious about you. Curiosity increases perceived value. Reflection question: how often do you remain in situations longer than necessary simply to avoid appearing rude? That habit quietly erodes your sense of control over your own time. Reclaiming that control restores psychological independence. Affirmation: my time and attention are valuable resources. Repeat that internally, because when you treat your attention as valuable, others begin treating it the same way. But there is one final layer that determines whether confidence feels authentic or artificial, and it has nothing to do with posture, silence, or social strategy. It comes from something far more fundamental: competence. The next section reveals why real authority always begins with mastery, and without it, every other technique eventually collapses. The authority of competence lets confront a truth most motivational content avoids. Confidence without ability eventually collapses. You can adjust your posture. You can slow your speech. You can master eye contact, but if, when pressure arrives, you cannot actually solve problems, people will eventually notice. And once they notice, the illusion disappears. Real authority is built on something far less glamorous than charisma. It is built on competence. Philosopher Aristotle wrote that excellence is not an act but a habit, meaning mastery comes from repetition, not inspiration. This principle appears everywhere. In medicine, the calmest surgeon in the operating room is usually the one who has performed the procedure hundreds of times. In aviation, the most reassuring pilot is the one who has logged thousands of hours in the sky. Their calmness isn't theatrical. It is earned because when difficulty appears, their brain recognizes patterns. They've seen the problem before. They know the next step, and that certainty creates a very specific type of confidence, the kind that doesn't need to be announced. The competence stack, one powerful way to develop authentic confidence, is through something we can call the competence stack. Instead of trying to become perfect in one area immediately, you gradually build overlapping skills. For example, a professional who understands communication, psychology, and strategy often becomes more effective than someone who only specializes narrowly. Business strategist Peter Drucker frequently emphasized that successful leaders combine multiple competencies. They understand people, they understand systems, they understand priorities. This layered capability produces a unique advantage. Because when others panic, the competent individual begins analyzing. Example, the quiet problem solver. Imagine a workplace crisis. A major system fails, deadlines are collapsing, voices grow louder, people begin blaming each other. In the middle of this chaos sits one person who simply asks, "Let's identify the actual problem first." They begin gathering information. They ask precise questions. Within minutes, the group shifts from emotional panic to structured problem solving. What just happened? Authority transferred to the person who introduced clarity, not because they demanded leadership, but because competence naturally attracts responsibility. People trust the individual who knows what to do. Personal mastery exercise. Choose one domain of your life that truly matters: your career, your health, your intellectual development. Then ask yourself a difficult question. Am I genuinely skilled here, or am I hoping confidence will substitute for ability? If the answer reveals weakness, that is good news, because skills can be built. Confidence built on real ability becomes nearly unshakable. The hard truth: many people search for psychological tricks to appear powerful, but the most powerful signal is simple: reliability. When others know that you consistently deliver results, their perception changes. They begin trusting your judgment. They begin asking for your perspective, and eventually something fascinating happens. Your words begin shaping decisions. Not because you demanded influence, but because you demonstrated value repeatedly. Affirmation: my confidence is built on capability. Repeat that idea, because when you truly believe it, something changes inside you. You stop trying to impress people with words. You start letting your work speak. But even competence is not the final step. There is one psychological barrier that prevents many capable individuals from fully stepping into leadership. And it is surprisingly emotional. It is the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being judged, the fear of being called difficult. Which brings us to the next transformation. The courage to disappoint. There is a moment in every person's life when they face a difficult realization. You cannot satisfy everyone, no matter how polite you are, no matter how helpful you try to be. Someone will eventually feel disappointed. Many people spend years avoiding this reality. They agree to requests they cannot afford. They tolerate behavior that drains their energy. They stay silent when boundaries are crossed, all to avoid one uncomfortable label: selfish. But leadership experts often emphasize a counterintuitive truth. The ability to set boundaries is not selfishness. It is self-respect. Author and researcher Brené Brown has written extensively about the relationship between boundaries and self-worth. Her research suggests that people who clearly define their limits often experience healthier relationships. Why? Because boundaries create clarity. They communicate what behavior is acceptable and what is not. Without them, resentment grows quietly. The boundary scenario: imagine a colleague asking for help with a project. Helping once or twice is generous. But imagine this pattern repeating every week. Eventually, your own responsibilities suffer. Now you face a decision. Option 1: continue saying yes, quietly building frustration. Option 2: calmly explain that you cannot continue assisting in the same way. Many people choose option 1, not because it is healthy, but because it avoids temporary discomfort. Yet avoiding discomfort today often creates greater problems tomorrow. Reframing disapproval here is a powerful mental shift. Instead of asking, "Will this decision upset someone?" ask, "Is this decision aligned with my values and priorities?" That question reframes the entire situation. Because leadership requires prioritization, every choice benefits some people and disappoints others. History offers countless examples. Reformers, innovators, and pioneers often faced criticism before their contributions were understood. Consider scientist Marie Curie. Her research transformed science and medicine. Yet during her lifetime, she faced intense scrutiny and social criticism. Progress rarely emerges without resistance. The boundary formula: setting a boundary does not require aggression. It requires clarity. A simple structure works well. Acknowledge the request. State your limitation. Offer an alternative if appropriate. For example, "I understand this is important, but I can't commit additional time this week." Clear. Respectful. Final. No lengthy justification required. Affirmation: respect grows where boundaries are clear. Because when people see that you respect your own limits, they begin respecting them as well. But something interesting happens once you master boundaries. Your time becomes more protected, your energy becomes more focused, and gradually you begin noticing something subtle. People start approaching you differently because independence creates a powerful social signal. It tells the world something important: you are not desperate for attention. And that leads us to the final transformation: becoming internally sovereign. Throughout history, philosophers have described a rare form of freedom. Not political freedom, not financial freedom, but psychological independence. Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught that many people live as prisoners of circumstances. They worry about reputation, they obsess over public opinion, they react emotionally to events outside their control. But individuals who master their internal world achieve something different. They become internally sovereign, meaning their sense of identity no longer depends on constant external reinforcement. Imagine waking up in the morning without immediately checking messages. Imagine working on a project because it matters to you, not because others are watching. Imagine making decisions guided by principle rather than popularity. This mindset changes everything, because once your internal compass becomes strong enough, external noise loses power. The three pillars of internal sovereignty. Let's simplify this idea into three practical pillars. 1. Self-observation. You begin noticing your reactions. Instead of immediately reacting to criticism, you pause and analyze it. Is it useful feedback, or merely someone else's frustration? 2. Value alignment. Your decisions reflect your personal values rather than temporary approval. This alignment creates stability. 3. Long-term vision. Instead of chasing short-term validation, you focus on meaningful goals. Author Viktor Frankl, who survived extreme hardship during the 20th century, wrote that humans can endure enormous difficulty when they possess a clear sense of purpose. Purpose organizes behavior. It transforms random effort into focused direction. Visualization exercise. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the future version of yourself 5 years from now. That version has developed skills, built discipline, earned respect through consistent action. Now ask yourself something important. What daily behaviors would that future version expect from you today? The answer reveals your next step, because transformation rarely begins with dramatic moments. It begins with small, repeated actions, walking with intention, speaking thoughtfully, choosing priorities carefully. Gradually, those habits reshape identity. Final affirmation: I direct my life from within. Hold on to that sentence, because when you truly internalize it, you stop drifting through life reacting to other people's expectations. Instead, you begin authoring your own direction, and that is where genuine confidence originates. Not from dominance, not from intimidation, but from alignment between who you are and how you live. Let's step back for a moment, not to repeat everything we've discussed, but to see the bigger pattern that has been unfolding throughout this entire journey. Most people spend their lives trying to appear confident. They practice the right words. They rehearse clever responses. They chase admiration, approval, recognition. But real presence doesn't come from trying to convince the world you matter. It comes from reaching a point where you no longer need the world to confirm it. That shift is subtle, yet life-changing. Because once your sense of value stops depending on applause, your behavior transforms almost automatically. You stop rushing your words. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop reshaping yourself every time someone disapproves. And something fascinating begins to happen. The energy you once spent managing other people's opinions suddenly becomes available for something far more powerful. Building, learning, mastering, creating a life that reflects your values rather than society's expectations. Think about the principles we explored. You learned how approval, seeking quietly drains authority. You saw how posture and movement communicate confidence long before words appear. You discovered the strategic power of silence and how patience creates psychological gravity. You confronted the addictive pull of external validation and the freedom that comes from breaking it. You realized that real influence emerges from competence, from repeatedly proving to yourself that you can handle difficult situations. You accepted the uncomfortable but necessary truth that leadership requires the courage to disappoint people sometimes. And finally, you encountered the idea of internal sovereignty, the rare state where your identity is guided by principles rather than popularity. Each of these ideas builds upon the others, not as tricks, not as manipulative strategies, but as habits that reshape how you move through the world. Because presence is not a performance, It is a byproduct of alignment. Alignment between your values, your actions, and your direction in life. Imagine two different futures. In the first future, nothing changes. You continue smoothing over disagreements to avoid conflict. You continue explaining yourself to people who never intended to understand. You continue seeking reassurance from people who are just as uncertain as you are. Years pass, your potential remains quietly unrealized, not because you lacked intelligence, not because you lacked opportunity, but because you spent too much energy negotiating your worth with the world. Now imagine a different future. In this version of your life, you begin making small but powerful adjustments. You slow down your speech. You become comfortable with silence. You invest deeply in mastering your craft. You set boundaries that protect your time and energy. You stop asking permission to pursue your goals. Gradually, people begin noticing something different about you. Not arrogance, not aggression, but a calm certainty, a sense that you are guided by an internal compass rather than external pressure. And that kind of presence changes everything, because people trust individuals who appear self-directed. They listen more closely. They respect decisions more quickly. They sense that you are not easily manipulated by praise or criticism. Here is the paradox most people never realize. The moment you stop chasing respect is often the moment it begins appearing. Not because you demanded it, but because your behavior signals something rare, independence, and independence is magnetic. It tells the world that your identity is stable, that your confidence is grounded in effort, discipline, and self-knowledge, that your direction does not shift every time public opinion changes. So the real question now is not whether these ideas are interesting. The real question is whether you are willing to practice them, because transformation does not occur through inspiration alone. It occurs through repetition, small decisions repeated daily until they become instinct. Tomorrow morning, try one simple experiment. Walk slightly slower than usual, not dramatically, just enough to remind yourself that you control your pace. During conversations, allow a brief pause before answering questions. Notice how your thoughts become clearer. Throughout the day, observe moments where you feel the urge to seek approval. Then quietly remind yourself, your value does not require negotiation. Over time, these small shifts begin stacking on top of each other, and eventually something remarkable happens. You stop trying to act confident because you genuinely become composed. And that is the ultimate transformation. Not dominance, not intimidation, but self-possession, the ability to stand firmly within your own identity, regardless of who is watching or judging. History remembers individuals who cultivated that kind of inner stability. Leaders, thinkers, innovators who shaped the world not by begging for approval, but by committing to their vision. Their confidence did not appear overnight. It was forged slowly through discipline, learning, and courage. And the same process is available to anyone willing to walk that path, including you. So as you leave this video, carry one idea with you. Confidence is not a personality trait. It is a practice of self-awareness, a practice of discipline, a practice of living according to principles rather than convenience. And every time you choose alignment over approval, you move one step closer to becoming the kind of person whose presence speaks long before their words do. Because the most powerful individuals in any room are rarely the loudest. They are the ones who know exactly who they are. And once you reach that point, you stop trying to fit into the world. You begin shaping it instead.